Bava Kamma. Hey, we begin the Gemara from the two dots. The Gemara is discussing what happens when somebody steals a sheep or a cow and it changes value. How do you pay? What is the returning of the money calculated? So the Gemara begins with a brisa. The brisa brings three opinions. What happens when you have a sheep and you shore the wool off the sheep, or it gave birth? Now, according to our Gemara, it's talking about a sheep that you shore or a cow that gave birth. According to the gears of the Bach, it's talking about one animal, and it was shorn and it gave birth. But either way, the shaila is, how do you return the sheep, and how do you return the shearings, and how do you return the child? Do you give it back? Do you give some of it back? Do you give some of it back and give the money back? What do you do? So the first opinion is Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says you return it and its shearings and the vlad. If they return all of them in its improved value, you have to give it all back just the way it was. Now, obviously, it's not exactly the way it was, but you give everything you got, you give it all back. You don't get to keep any of it, even though there's a shinoi, it changed, you give it all back. Rabbi Yehuda says you return the animal itself, you return the sheep, and the difference in value between the sheep now and the sheep at the time you stole it, you pay in cash. You don't have to give back the vlad, you don't have to give back the shearings, but you do have to give back the difference in value at the time that it got stolen to now. Now, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Shimon says you evaluate the entire thing at the time that you stole it and you give it all back in cash the way you stole it then. So now the Gemara begins analyzing these opinions one by one. So first of all, Rabbi Meir had said you give it all back just the way it is. The Gemara has a chakir. What's pshat? Does he hold that the shini doesn't make a difference? It still belongs to the original owner and therefore you give him back what he owns? Or does he generally hold that a shini does make a difference and it belongs to the thief, but although he should ordinarily keep the increased value, we don't want him to benefit from stealing, and therefore we say he has to give it back, even though it was his cow, it was his sheep that gave birth, and his sheep that he shore. What's Nafka Mina? The Gemara says Nafka Mina would be as if instead of going up in value, it went down in value. If he holds that it still belongs to the original owner, he can just give it back and say it's yours, even though it went down. I'm returning what I stole. But if it does not belong to the original owner, if it belongs to the thief, then he could potentially have to give back the sheep as it was at the time that he stole it and pay more than it's worth now just to cover the time that he stole it. So to answer this chakir, the Gemara attempts to bring a few rayas. The Gemara's first proof is from the brisa, where it discusses what happens if you stole an animal and avadim, and then they got old. They got older and they got weaker, and therefore they went down in value. So how do you return it? So the Bava Kamma, who's the chachamim, say you return the animal and the avadim as they were at the time of the theft, meaning you have to pay the difference in the value. You have to make up the difference in the value if they're worth less now. Rabbi Meir says there's a difference between avadim and behemoths. Avadim, he could just give it back and say, here, it's yours. Even though it went down in value, this is the same eved that I stole, I'm returning it to you. However, for a behemoth, the implication there at least is that he has to return it at its value at the time of the theft, and if it went down, he has to pay the difference. Now, why is there a difference between an eved and a behemoth? So the difference is because an eved is considered to be like karka, it's like land, and it's never really stolen. Wherever it is, it still belongs to the owner. And therefore, you could just give it back and say it was never actually stolen from you, even though you didn't have possession over the eved. It's still considered in your shus all along. However, the behemoth, which was stolen, it implies that Rabbi Meir holds that it's koina, and shinoi is koina, and therefore he's saying that you would have to return it as the value at the time of the theft. In our case, where it went up, the reason that the thief has to give that back is because of a knas, a special fine that he should not gain from it. So that's what seems to be a proof. The Gemara rejects the proof by saying, no, Rabbi Meir is actually speaking in the opinion of the Chachamim. He himself says, according to me, the shooting makes no difference, and therefore even an animal, you do not have to pay at the time of the gzela, you have to pay whatever it's worth now, because it belongs to the owner, even though there was a shinoi from the time of the theft. However, according to you, Rabbanan, that you hold that shinoi is kleina, and therefore now belongs to the eved, and you shouldn't have to pay the difference. You should at least agree with me that by an eved, that he has a din of land, and that land cannot be stolen, and therefore you should have to pay. He should just return it. They shouldn't have to pay the difference. And that the Rabbanan say no. Actually, we don't view Avadim as being like a karka. We view Adam as being like metaltalin, and therefore they do not have to make up the difference. The Gemara's second raya is from a worker who was given wool to dye, and he dyed it the wrong color. We're supposed to dye it red, instead he dyed it black. We're supposed to dye it black, instead he dyed it red, and now he has to return it. So Rav Meir says he gives him the value of the original wool. He does not have to give him the increased value because of the dyeing job that he did. Now, this is not a case of a theft. And if it still belonged to the original owner, even though there was a shinoi, Rabbi Meir should say he should give it back the way it is. The fact that he says he only has to return the value of the original wool, not the increased value of the dyeing job, means that he holds that the shinoi is koineh, and therefore it belongs to the original owner. And over here, there's no knas, so because he didn't steal it, and therefore he doesn't have to give him the increased value. He could keep that for himself. It's only the original value that he needs to give, and therefore, in the case of our brisa, where he was a thief, the reason he has to pay the extra value is because of the knas. The Gemara now has a second version of the Shaila, what's Shad and Rabbi Meir. According to this version, there is no Shaila that he certainly holds that Shinoi is koineh, and that the reason that the thief here needs to pay the full value is because of knas. The way we know that is because Rav changed the two opinions. In the case of the stolen cow and the avodim that got old, Rav flipped the opinions here and said that Rabbi Meir is the one who says that neither one do you pay, do you say Hareshacha Lefanecha. In each one of them, you need to pay the Kishas Gzela. So therefore, that clearly holds, Rabbi Meir, since he holds that by both of them, clearly he's holding Shina is koineh. And therefore, if Shina is koineh, in our case where he needs to pay the extra, even though it was Mashbech in his Rishos, is because of a Knas. The question is, according to this version, this Knas was made by a thief who stole b'mezid, or even somebody who ended up with stolen property that he has to return b'shoigeg. Rashi says the case would be that he bought it from the thief and he didn't know that it was stolen at the time he bought it, and he found out he wants to return it. Does he have to return the extra shevach if it came to his possession b'shoigeg? So on this, according to this version, the Gemara brings two rayas again. The first raya is from a brisa that lists 5 situations in which someone's collecting money or karka, and he can only collect from a property which is owned by the person he's collecting from still, not from property that he sold. So we call nechassim mishachrorin and not nechassim b'nei chayrin. Now, what would the reason be that he could collect this, but not from someone who bought it? Usually that's a situation where the person who bought it didn't know or couldn't know how much he was going to lose, or how much the seller owed. And therefore, he couldn't protect himself from being put in a situation where he's going to lose a property that he's about to buy. Now, the 5 cases the Brisa lists are as follows. It talks about fruits and the increased value of fruits. The Gemara will expand on this soon. It talks about someone who accepts upon himself to support the son and the daughter of his wife. That is, he marries a woman and says he'll accept the son and the daughter. He'll support her son and daughter. That is open-ended. There's no limit to that, and therefore, she can't collect for that property that he sold. The next case is a shtar chayv that does not have achrayis written on it. It does not have written on it that there is a shibud, there is a lien on property to collect that shtar chayv, and a ksuba sisha that does not have a lien written into it as well. So the Gemara says, first of all, who is the author of this brisa? It has to be Rabbi Meir, because the other opinions hold that even if a lien is not written into it, a lien's automatic. Nobody lends money without having a lien on it to collect, to be able to restore the property, and therefore it's automatic. And the only one who holds that it's not automatic is Rabbi Meir. And therefore, this opinion must be Rabbi Meir. That's why he says that if there's no lien, you can't collect from the chasam mishabanim. You cannot take away property that was sold because it doesn't have a lien on it. So the Gemara, now let's look at the first case of Paris and Shvach Paris. What does that mean? So the Gemara says the case is where Reuven owned the field, Shimon stole it from him, and then Shimon went and sold it to Levi, unbeknownst to Levi that he was selling him a stolen field. Reuven went to court, he got the property back from Levi, and now Levi goes to Shimon and says, you owe me for the field that you sold me, and now it was a stolen field and I don't have it. Not only do you owe me for the field, you owe me for the investment that I put into the field, the fertilization, the work, you owe me for the fruits that was growing on it that I lost, and all these things. So the Paris and Shvach Paris refers to the fruits and the increased value from those fruits that are growing on the field that Levi put into it, that now Shimon has to pay him. So Shimon does not have to pay that. He cannot pay that from his property, his own property that he sold. He cannot take that away from the buyer to pay him for that. Now, you see from here what's happening. When Reuven comes to take back his land, he also takes the shevach. He also takes the increased value, even though he's taking it from Levi, who came into possession of it b'shegeg. So you see that you can take away, even in case of shegeg, you do take away the increased value. So you see that Rabbi Meir says his knas even on increased value, even in the case of shegeg. Now, there's another reason that he would be able to take it back, and that's because we're talking about land here, and there's no such thing as stealing land. There's no changing reshus over the land. So the Gemara wants to say that is something only Talmud Chacham knows. The Pashtus is Rameir said as halacha, even if he's in Amaretz and he doesn't make that claim, still he gets it back because of the general rule that there is no shinoi, and or that the knas that we say still applies even on someone who has it b'shegeg. Someone says, no, we're only talking about a Talmud Chacham. It's not because of shegeg. You don't have a proof. And the reason that Reuven can take it back from Levi, even with the increased shevach, is because he still owns it wherever it is, karka ein exelis. The Gemara's second eye is the same as in the first version of what the question was. Same case of somebody who took wool from someone in order to dye it, but he dyed it the wrong color, red or black, whichever one was meant to be. He did the opposite. So over there, it's in his possession b'shegeg. He did not intend to steal it, didn't intend to mess it up. And the Psak Rabbi Meir says that he gives him back the wool. You see, he doesn't give him back the increased value. So you see that b'shegeg, you only give back the actual thing. You don't make a knas on the shevach if it's b'shegeg. So the Gemara accepts that as a proof. Gemara now moves on to the next two opinions in the Brisa, and that is Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara wants to know what the difference between them is. So Rabbi Yehuda had said that the stolen animal is returned the way it is, and whatever valuation the increased, whatever valuation the child, the vlad, and the shorn wool has, he has to pay that in cash. Rabbi Shimon says you evaluate the entire thing at the time that it was taken, at the time that the theft happened, and that's the money that you return. So the Gemara wants to know what's the difference between them. Either way, they're saying that you need to give the value of the animal itself plus the value of whatever improvements there were in cash. What's the difference? So the Gemara says the difference is if it became pregnant or it grew wool in his possession, does he have to give that or not? Rabbi Yehuda holds that that increased value belongs to the nigzal. It was a sheeting that was changed in his rishus. And Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He says, no, there's a shinoi, and the shinoi is kind by the gazan and belongs to him. He only needs to pay the value that it was at the time of the theft. So Rabbi Yehuda would say that you go by the time that they come to court, and he has to pay that extra. And Rabbi Shimon would say it's the value at the time of the theft, and if this money wasn't there, he doesn't need to pay that or not. That's the Gemara's first explanation, and this is brought by Rav Zvid. Rav Papa disagrees. He says, no, they all agree that the Gazlan gets to keep that increased value. The question is, does he have to pay a percentage? And this is because there's a minig medina, Rashi says, that if you take over someone's animals for a short time or for a long time, you increase his value to some extent. And there's a percentage there he has to pay, a half, a third, a fourth. So whatever that percentage is, even though the Gazlan gets to keep the increased value, does he have to pay a percentage of that, like a sharecropper? Okay, so says the Gemara now, in this machlekes between Rav Zvid and Rav Papa, we shall derive from our Mishnah. Mishnah discussed the case where somebody stole a cow and it became pregnant in his property, in his possession, or he stole a sheep and it grew wool in his possession, and then he shore it, or it gave birth, then he has to pay back only as at the time of the theft. Now that's not our case. The implication, though, is that if it would still be pregnant or still have the wool on it, he would have to return it the way it is. He wouldn't be able to return it only the way he stole it. He would have to return it with the vlad, with the pregnancy, with the wool that's on it, and that would go back to him, which means it belongs to the nigzal. According to Rav Zvid, so that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore you could say that this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. However, according to Rav Papa, everybody, Rav Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, both agree that it belongs to the Gazlan. The only question is, does he pay a percentage? So this Mishnah that says it belongs to the Nigzal doesn't fit with either of them. So that would be a kasha on Rav Papa's explanation of the Machlekes of Yehuda and Rav Shimon. So my answer is Rav Papa will say, no, the diuk you made is wrong. If it does not give birth and is pregnant, he still only has to pay the value at the time of the theft. And the increased value belongs to the Gazlan. Why did the Mishnah only say that it gave birth already, or it was shorn already? That's because in the previous case we were discussing where it gave birth or was shorn. That was where it was pregnant from before, or it had wool on it from before, and it lost it in his rishus, in the rishus of the Gazlan. Because we mentioned that in that case, we mentioned in this case as well. However, it's lav dafka. Same thing would be true even if it still had the pregnancy or the wool upon it at the time that it was returned. Gemara now notes we have a brisa actually that says like a Papa explicitly, called Reb Shimon, who says that we look at it as if it was evaluated for the money that he owes him, that the thief owes, the half, the third, the quarter, whatever the percentage that is the standard is. The Gemara now reports a shaila in the opinion of Reb Shimon. So Rav Ashi says, when we were in the yeshiva of Rav Kahana, we had a question, according to Reb Shimon, that says that he gives a percentage. So that means that a percentage of the value that the Gazlan invested in this animal, he gets back. How does he get it back? Does he get it back in cash, or does he take a piece, a chelik of the meat of this kayaf shechted and give him a piece? So he says we resolved it from the following statement of Rav Nachman and Rav Shmuel. So that there's only 3 situations in which you can push someone off with money, and you can pay them off. You don't have to give them an actual chelik. So one of them is a Bechar who's paying off the younger brothers to take a portion of the inheritance. That means the father died, the inheritance was put in escrow, it was controlled by all of them. And now the Bechar, they divide up the pieces, and the Bechar gets a extra portion for being Bechar. If one of the other brothers invested in it, the Bechar doesn't get an extra portion of that investment, so that money has to give back. So he can't or doesn't have to give it back as land. That he gives back to the other brothers in a cash form. Next is a Baal Chayv to a purchaser. If somebody lent money and he comes to collect from the borrower, and the borrower had sold his property, so he goes to the buyer to collect his lien. And if there was an investment that the buyer had put into it, so he gets that money back from the property. Again, he gets it in cash. He doesn't get to keep a piece of the property. He gets it in cash. And the third case is if the Baal Chayv, the lender, is taking from the Yisaimim, that's the borrower, had died, and the Yisaimim, the inheritors, the orphans as we call them, they are the ones holding the property now, and he wants to collect it from them. So if they invested in it, he again has to give them back their investment, and he can give it to them as cash. So you see, these are the 3 situations in which you push him off with cash and he doesn't get to keep a piece, which implies here this is not one of those situations, and he would get to keep a piece. The Gemara now asks, how could Shmuel have said this halacha about the Baal Chayv returning the money to the purchaser, to the lekech? Shmuel holds that the Baal Chayv doesn't have to give the improvements, the investments of the lekech back to him. He can actually keep the investments of the lekech. We have a Maimer Shmuel where he says that. So that contradicts what we said here about how he returns it. He holds he doesn't have to return it at all. So the Gemara answers, depends on what kind of improvements the field has. If it's improvements that are ready to be picked off, like fruits that are ready to be cut, then it's not considered to be part of the field. He can't collect it as part of his collection of his loan, and therefore he has to give those back to the lekech. If, however, they still require the field and they are part of the land, and then he can keep them, he does not have to give them back. That's what Shmuel was referring to. On that, the Gemara asks that there were incidents all the time, many incidents which occurred in which the food did not require, the improvements did not require the land anymore, and Shmuel still said that the Baal Chayv is allowed to take that, and he does not have to give those improvements, those investments back to the Lakeach. So the Gemara answers, it depends how much money he was owed. If he was owed the money which covers those investments, then he's allowed to keep them. If he was owed money which doesn't cover, that's what we're talking about here when he has to return it, because he's not even owed that amount, and therefore he has to give that back to the Lakeach. So now the Gemara says that there's machlokes which is relevant to this. Machlokes is, can the lekeach push away the Baal Chayv with money? The Baal Chayv comes to take the field. Can the lekeach say, you know what, I'm going to pay you off. I'm going to give you money for the amount that you're owed. I want to keep the field. The machlokes if he's allowed to do that or not. Now, if you hold he's not allowed to do that, that means that the field is considered to be belonging to the Baal Chayv, and he takes it away. So I understand why he's allowed to keep the field and even the shavach of the field. If, however, he can't, and the Baal Chayv and the Lekech give him the money. So then at least for the Shevach, even though he doesn't have money now to give him, he should be able to take money for that. He should be able to say, you take money and leave that with me. Why should the Baal Chayv have the right to take that money away from him? So on that, the Gemara answers, the case was that this land was made in apoitiki. It was made a specific item from which this loan will be collected. In a case like that, he can't push him off with money. He's supposed to take this land as payment for his loan. The Lekech cannot give him money l'chol, and that's what we're referring to, that he cannot collect the Shevach either. The Shevach goes to the Baal Chayv.